If I could start house flipping all over again, what would I do first?
What if the market crashes?
What will your wife think?
You don't know what you're doing. Give up. Don't do it. Be scared.
I felt overwhelmed about those things for years, but after coming out on the other side, I realized it's a lot more simple than you think. So I'm going to tell you about how I would take down my first 1 through 3 deals if I had to do it all over again. Then I'll tell you how I do deals 4 through 8, and then 8 through 15.
When I was younger, I had a good corporate job, and it allowed me to buy some rental property, and then try to put renters in it to cover my mortgage. But I knew there was something more than what I was doing. I knew that what I really needed to do was make this my profession, to become a house flipper. See, I think I even understood at the time, to really get great at growing a rental portfolio, I needed to be good at flipping houses. This would give me the cash flow and the experience I needed to really take my game to the next level. When I was working my corporate job back in Omaha, Nebraska, I pulled up to a Subway for lunch, and an old Cadillac pulled up, and guess who hopped out? It was Warren Buffett. He lives there. And I was thinking, man, I bet he didn't get where he was at by working somebody else's profit and loss statement. Then I knew it was time for me to make a move. So the next day, I started to make a plan. Unfortunately for me, I didn't plan very long. I found the next flip that I could buy, I bought it, and then I learned a lot of lessons the hard way. Now, if I could go back in time and do my first deal all again, what I would do differently is I would focus on nothing but getting a great deal on the front end. That's the one thing that solves all of the other problems. However, there are some things that I would do first. I would set up an LLC and a checking account. This is where a lot of people get freaked out. They let analysis paralysis set in. They hear all the things about you gotta have an LLC that's registered in whatever state, and you gotta do this, that, and the other thing, and you gotta get your CPA and your attorney and the blah, 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 blah. I have set up so many companies in the parking lot of Wells Fargo. It doesn't take that much. Remember that all of those things are there to protect assets and to preserve the money that you have. You don't have any assets or money until you get started. So just focus on getting started. Now I would turn my attention to actually getting that deal. There are a lot of ways to get a deal, but I'm gonna focus on one way, the way that I see is the best way. And I'm gonna go direct to a potential seller. And the way that I would do that is I would go to any of these companies out there that provide lists for me to be able to market to. There are actually companies out there that make lists of all the properties in the area that you want to market to. You'll be able to filter those lists down to things like what size of house you want, how many bedrooms you want, does the owner live here or do they live somewhere else? How many other properties do they own? What's the tax value of the house? What's the value of the house? How much do they owe on the house? From that data, I will filter and make the list that I want. At least to start, I would just go for the most popular list there is, which means the most effective list there is. Now, I would take that list and I would go to another service that sends direct mail. The one that I've used quite a bit in the past is called Yellow Letter HQ. You're gonna provide the list that you bought to that direct mail service, and they're gonna send out mail that says whatever you would like it to say. Something like, hi, I'm an investor and I wanna buy your house in cash. Instead of getting cute here, just use whatever copy everybody else has used that works. And now your phones are gonna ring. Generally, if you send out 1,000 pieces of mail, you'll get a 1% return. So that'd be 10 phone calls. That might turn into around 3 appointments. And out of those 3 appointments, you might get 1 contract. And out of that 1 contract, generally 60, maybe 70% will close. Obviously, to make this work, you need to set up a phone number. I usually use a VoIP system, so that way people don't have my personal phone number. A pro tip here, set up a website or just a landing page so people know you're legit. Helps if you're local. It builds trust. Eventually, I get a deal. And once I have a deal under contract, at that point, I'm gonna go out and I'm gonna find the money to actually close on the deal. I know that seems backwards, but in this game, you need to actually present a lender with a deal. When I get that house under contract, I'm obviously gonna be doing a walkthrough. On that walkthrough, I would make the most detailed scope of work I could possibly make. I would write down everything that I'm gonna do on that property and exactly how I'm gonna do it. And then I would take a video, I would take photos, I would write down my scope of work because chances are I'm not gonna be able to go back into that property before I close on it. When I leave there, I'm gonna go to a lender and I'm gonna ask them for the money to buy the house and do the renovation. I'm gonna use the scope of work I built with a budget to show that hard money lender exactly what I need to borrow. And you might ask what a hard money lender is. Well, a bank is not gonna lend you money on a house that's not livable today. And chances are the deal that you get off market is not gonna be livable. It's gonna need renovations to get it to a place that can be livable, therefore make money on it. Once I've gotten a commitment from the hard money lender, now I'm gonna go to contractors and I'm gonna get them to bid the scope of work that I've made. At this point, I likely won't be able to get them in the house, and so they're gonna be giving me soft bids, which basically means a ballpark estimate of what they think it would cost that they'll firm up once we actually purchase the property. And once I close on the house, I'll get the bids firmed up, I'll hire the contractors, and then I'll just do some good old-fashioned project management and watch that plane get landed. A couple other notes on this first deal, assuming that I'm starting back at zero, is I would have a tight leash on my personal finances to make sure I was in a position to not get my back up against the wall financially or with time. And finally, I would not start looking for another deal until I was sure I had this one in the bag. You don't want to add any extra risk this early. Right now I'm just getting my bearings, because once I have everything in order, I'll be able to really take off. So I'm gonna wait until I actually have that deal sold before I find the next one. I would use this same strategy on deals 1 through 3. And I would take my time. I would expect this to take 12 to 18 months, and I would be okay with that. I finally finished that first flip, the one I left my job for, and I actually made some money, some big money. And I thought it was because of the skills that I had acquired as a flipper. But in reality, in hindsight, it was all because the market had risen. But naturally, it gave me a lot of confidence. Next, I did a bigger project, and then a bigger one, and then a bigger one, until the market stopped working in my favor, and I lost it all. All the gains that I had made over those years, I lost in one single deal. And I thought I was back to ground zero. But then, if you remember, when I was in my corporate job, I had bought some rentals. And over the time that I was flipping all these houses, they had actually risen in value as well. And so I was sitting on quite the nest egg. And that's what brings me to the point that house flipping is a great vehicle for putting cash in your pocket and for gaining experience to help you do what we're really here to do, which is build a real estate portfolio of rental property. A quick side note here. I want you to understand that for most people, the biggest chunk of wealth that they'll ever have is their personal residence. Let's just break down how that works. They're gonna buy a house for X amount, let's say $300,000, and they're gonna get most likely a 30-year mortgage put on that house. They're gonna pay their payments every month until the balance on that loan is down to zero. And then they're gonna own the house outright. So they own that $300,000 house completely. The thing is, over 30 years, that house is no longer worth $300,000. The real estate market appreciates every year. On average, some say up to 7%, but I like to be conservative, so I say 3%. So what does that mean for that $300,000 house? Let's do some quick math here. Hey, all right, doing some quick math here. That means that after 30 years, that house would be worth $728,000. That is their biggest chunk of wealth. And so when I understood that, I thought, well, wait, if your biggest chunk of wealth comes from your personal residence, why wouldn't you do that with a whole bunch of houses? But the thing is, when you're buying rental properties, it's not you that's paying that monthly fee, it's your tenants through the rent. For example, your mortgage payment is $1,500 a month, the tenant pays you $2,000 for rent, they're covering your mortgage cost. They're building your wealth.
It's free real estate.
This is such a safe investment that even banks will give you money to go buy this. And that leverage, as they call it, is the reason why the most people get wealthy from real estate. Now I'm focused on what I would do after deal 3, all the way through to deal 8. And what I would really be focused on here is gaining my first rental property using the BRRRR strategy. That's buy, renovate, rent, and refinance. And basically the way that that works is instead of selling your house on the market to a buyer, you're selling it to a bank, i.e. you're getting a mortgage put on the property so you can hold it. And that mortgage will buy off the hard money loan that you had. And my other focus at this stage is gonna be minimizing renovations, buying back my bandwidth. At this stage, there are a couple new vendors that I'm gonna need to meet with. One is a bank or other type of lender that is gonna give me a long-term fixed rate mortgage. And 2 is a property manager, somebody who's gonna manage that property so my bandwidth isn't stolen by plunging toilets. I'm really gonna be thinking about how to systematize things here, especially getting deals. Now I really need to up the ante on getting better deals because I'm not gonna wait for that deal to sell before I get the next one. I'm gonna start looking for the next deal as soon as I put that last one on the market. At this point, I would probably add an outbound marketing channel. We were just doing mail before. I might start doing some cold calling or hire a cold calling service. Or add in some digital marketing like Facebook or Google ads. Maybe run a social media campaign. At this point, if I got some extra deals that I wasn't personally gonna buy, I would start building a buyer's list so I had somebody to sell those to immediately. Other investors like us. And if you get really great at finding deals, you'll be able to do what we call a wholesale. That's where you're able to buy the property, put it right back on the multiple listing service or Zillow. And if you haven't picked it up, finding better deals is what's gonna minimize your renovations. Because before you know how to find a great deal, the only way to create a great deal is by doing huge renovations where nobody else wants to buy the house, which is a fine strategy, but not if you want to scale up. However, there are going to be renovations. So you got to make sure as you're building your ability to get deals, you're also building your subcontractor pool. But mostly in this stage, focus on good deals. Another pro tip here. There's also an option to get seller financed or subject to deals. Now you may have heard of this before, but it's kind of like the holy grail for house flipping and house investment. You don't even really count these against your deal count because they're kind of freebies. Let me explain how it works. One of two ways. One is seller financing. This works when the person owns the house outright, meaning there's no mortgage on the property. And instead of you having to go get a bank loan for the property or use your own cash, the seller will hold a note for you. Holding a note basically means instead of the bank giving you a mortgage, the seller gives you a mortgage. Second is subject to. In full, it means buying the property subject to the mortgage that's in place. In more layman's terms, it's a little bit more complex than this, but basically it means that you are going to take over the payments on the mortgage that they have with the bank. So the mortgage will stay in their name, but you will own the property. And why is this such a pro tip? Because in a lot of cases, you don't even have to put any of your own cash on the table to make a deal like this work. So it doesn't even count against your deal count. Now, after adopting these new strategies that I learned from the guy across the street, I was able to take my real estate investment to the next level. See, I no longer had to spend 550 days straight working on the same renovation. I could put processes in place where I could repeat the same thing over and over and over again, which actually opened the door to new opportunities. It really allowed me to scale up and find partners to bring money to deals, to raise private equity in funds, so I could go from flipping one house a year to one house a month or even a week. It's when I learned it's all about going an inch wide and a mile deep, as opposed to what I was doing before, a mile wide and an inch deep. Now, if I could go back and do deals 8 through 15 again, I would know exactly what type of deals I wanted and where I wanted to go with them, and I would focus on nothing but that one thing. And for me, that's B or C class properties that are under 1,500 square feet that need a little bit to a medium amount of work. Maybe a renovation that is $0 all the way to $60,000. Anything bigger than that, I'm not really taking on at this point. Because when you get beyond that point, a lot of that extra work requires a lot of problem solving. Problem solving requires all of my bandwidth. Bandwidth is the one thing that I'm really trying to preserve. At this point, I'm trying to make sure that every deal looks as much like the last one as possible. In fact, it would be a compliment if you say, all those pictures look the same from the different houses that you're doing. It seems boring. Perfect. Boring is systematizing. See, that's really the hardest part in all of this. It is kind of boring doing the same thing over and over and over again. But the thing is, the way to win Monopoly is not to buy one of the blue properties, then one of the red, and then one of the green. You buy a purple, and you don't stop until you have all the purples. And then you put as many houses as you can, and then you go to the yellows, and you do the same thing. See, that's been my problem in the past. I kept wanting to make a rainbow. Now the problem here is you just can't do everything, and I thought I could, and that ended up with me writing checks that I just couldn't cash. In doing this over, once I had my 15 properties completed and I had my systems down and I was really ready to scale up, I would make sure I knew exactly what I wanted. I would make sure that I knew exactly what type of properties I wanted to do and how I was going to get there and what type of partners I wanted to take on, what kind of money I wanted to raise, and I would focus only on those things until I got to a predetermined goal. And it's at that point that I would finally pull my head up for air. And the thing is, I've actually thought a lot about what those things would be. And it's only 4 things, and I call it my all-weather approach. And in fact, I made a whole video about it, and you can check it out right here.
You're just a goofy looking dude with a beard and long hair. Nobody likes man buns. I bet you have a weak jaw. That's why you have a beard, isn't it? Stay in your job, you loser.
All right, that's good.